Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to toy-polloi. Now, if you've been watching my recent videos, you'll have seen me fix the arms on a vintage 12-inch Star Wars Darth Vader, and also show you how to make a replacement cape, as you can see here before me on the two Darth Vaders that I have. But the one thing that Darth Vader is still missing is his lightsaber. So today we're going to have a look at how to make a replacement lightsaber for this vintage 12-inch Star Wars Darth Vader. Now, as I don't have a vintage lightsaber, I asked on my Facebook page if anyone could help me out with some images, and very kindly Martin Loy sent me some pictures, as you can see here, of a original lightsaber next to a tape measure, and from these I'm able to work out the measurements of what we're going to need to make. So you can see here that the lightsaber blade is that's 5 inches long, so that's 12.5 centimeters in total. Now, that's the first thing we need to find. So I had a quick look around on eBay and purchased some of this, which is a clear plastic perspex rod. Now this is a 4mm diameter rod, and this is I think this is 25 centimeters long. So from this we should be able to make two lightsabers. As you can see, I've just marked it in the middle just so that we can sort of see that you can actually get two lengths of lightsaber. Now this is fairly expensive. I think in total this costs just over £5 to get this sent out, just this single rod. You can buy clear plastic perspex rods for much cheaper, but obviously we need the red stuff, and for some reason this seems expensive. I'm going to see if I can find it cheaper still, but for the moment, for the purposes of this video, I paid the £5 to get this. Now again, from the photos I was able to work out the measurements of the other parts of the lightsaber, which of course is the handle. Now this is 3.5 centimeters long. Now the bit of plastic I'm going to use from this actually came from some packaging. This was packaged in a pair of shoes that Mrs. Toy-polloi bought quite a while back, but I thought the plastic looked useful, so I've kept it in my toolbox ever since. As you can see, it's a fairly sort of solid piece of plastic rod. It does have a hole down the middle, but it seemed the right sort of size, so I think that's what we're going to use to make the basis of this, and we should be able to use a bit of milliput or something to add some details to it, but really we need to check that this fits inside Darth Vader's hand. So I have a Darth Vader here, and as you can see that fits in pretty nicely. That's a pretty good fit, and by the time we've added a few bits of details it should sort of hold pretty firmly. I have a few different types of this plastic tube, and there's a grey one here as well. See, that fits quite nicely. Another one like that, again all pretty good fits. So I think by the time we've shaped this down, that should work quite well. So let's start constructing. So we have the two main components to make this lightsaber. As I say, this is 4mm perspex rod, and this one, if I just measure here, you can see that the diameter of that is 7mm, so sort of 7 to 7.5 millimeters diameter should work perfectly well. And to get this to fit, I'm actually going to drill a 4mm hole in the end of it, but we can do that in a second, because the first thing we need to do is work out sort of the basic shapes and things that we're going to need on this. Now I've done a little drawing, as you can see here, and this is an accurate scale drawing based on the picture that Martin sent me. So the whole length of the handle is 3.5 centimeters. There's a little raised sort of lip there which is 5mm, and then the handle itself has little sort of ridges all the way along it. So I've just marked those on here, because what I'm going to do is take this and hold it over the bit of paper like so, and then I've got a pencil and I'm just going to draw on here where all of these key points are, and then I'm going to cut the sort of 3.5mm length. So that is the absolute end of the lightsaber handle, and then I want to mark, I'm just going to turn it around that way, where all of these bits go, so I know how far to drill into the end of it and stuff like that. So I'm going to just mark on these little marks where I want ridges to be. Now you don't have to do all of this, it's just nice. I thought I'd try and make this look as original as possible. I'm going to mark on where that extra large sort of lip bit needs to go. I'll fill in there. So you can see now I have a few little marks. So I'm going to cut this rod at that point, and I'm going to drill a 4mm hole in the end of this, but I'm only going to drill the hole in, needs to be about 1 centimeter, because the original lightsaber blade only goes in about 1 centimeter like that, and that way we can then start shaping this into something that looks more like a lightsaber. So the first thing I need to do is actually drill the hole. So this is a 4mm drill bit, and I'm going to drill in about 1 centimetre into the end of this little bit of tubing here. So I'm just going to carefully do this. If you're doing this at home, it's probably best to use a vise, but obviously because I want to film this, I'm doing it just on my desk here. So I'm just going to carefully run the drill bit like that. So if I put the bit of perspex in there, you can see that now fits quite nicely, and I can cut off this end piece so that we have a 3.5 centimetre length that we can start shaping. Now that this little bit of pipe is cut and has a hole in the end that the perspex fits into, we can start trying to shape it. If we again have a look at the image that I was sent, you can see that there's little ridges along the handle to make it look like a grip. So we're going to try and recreate those, and that's what those little marks are. If you see the little pencil marks that I put on there, that's what those are to indicate. So I'm going to use some small needle files. Now I've shown you these before and I've used them in many of my restorations. I have a triangular shaped needle file. So if you look at the end of it, you can see that it is a triangle shape, and I'm going to use this to carefully sort of cut a little groove along where I made that pencil line, and I'm going to slowly rotate the tube around like so, until I've gone all the way around the edge. Make sure that's sort of fairly deep. And you can see that that has created a little groove. So if I do that along every one of these pencil marks, we'll end up with a sort of thing that simulates the little ridges that were on the original lightsaber handle. So let's go ahead and we'll do all of these. So after 5 minutes of filing, we've ended up with this, which is a little rod now with a few little grooves in it that makes it look a little bit more like a handle. I'm pretty pleased with how that's come out. Next thing we've got to do is make the sort of larger ridge that goes around the top. Now for that we're going to use some milliput. I've shown you how to use this a number of times. If you've watched my video on making a new antenna for Boba Fett, you'll have seen me use the same stuff. So we're going to just use a small amount of that to make a little, it's a 5mm wide and only sort of a few millimeters deep, just to make a little sort of ridge so that it looks like there's a sort of top to this lightsaber. So let's get mixing of this, and we'll make something to look good on the end of this lightsaber handle. So I've now mixed up a small amount of milliput. I have a little bit of water here and a flat bladed knife, because what we're going to do is I'm going to push out the milliput and make a sort of long flat surface, about, let's say, sort of 3mm thick. I'm just going to push this onto my little cutting mat here, and then I'm going to use the knife to carefully cut a strip out of the milliput. And I said this needs to be 5mm, so you can either do this with a ruler or just do it by eye. I'm going to do it by eye just to be quick. So there we go, there's a 5mm strip of milliput that is about 3mm sort of thick. So we're going to take the little lightsaber handle that I've made here, carefully pull the milliput up, and I'm going to stick this around the top area where I've marked. Referring back to my original drawing and the images that I was sent, I can sort of see roughly where it needs to go, and I can just rotate this around and stick this in place. Now obviously there's slightly too much here, so again I'm going to just get the knife and cut off a chunk of that, like so, and I can start carefully shaping this and sort of squidging it together. I want to try and keep it as neat as possible with a sort of flat edge, but obviously I've got to do a little bit of manhandling to get this to look good. You can see that's starting to look right, and that's where the water comes into play. I'm going to dip the knife into the water, and I can start to shape the milliput nice and easily just by running the knife around the edge of this. And whatever I don't manage to get sort of smooth, I can then come back to, once the milliput has gone hard after about 24 hours, I can then start filing it and shaping it finally. But for now I'll try and get this as accurate as I can be, just by carefully shaping this with the edge of the knife. After a little bit of fine tuning, I've been able to make quite a nice sort of ridge there, and that looks pretty close to the image that I was sent. The only thing I need to do now is the end obviously has a hole in it, so I'm just going to take a little bit of rolled up milliput here and squidge that in the end just to fill that hole up. And I'm maybe even going to shape that into something that looks a little bit more like the hilt of a lightsaber. But initially I'm just going to push some bits in just to sort of fill that hole up, so that when we come to paint this there isn't a hole in the bottom of it. Again, this can all be filed down once it's dry, so really at the moment it doesn't matter if it's a little bit on the messy side. That's pretty good. So we can now let this dry, and as I say, this takes 24 hours to dry properly, and at that time we should then be able to file it without any problems. If you try and file it beforehand, chances are things will break or it will get a bit squidgy, so it's best to leave it as long as you possibly can. While we're waiting for the milliput to dry, we can start constructing the actual lightsaber blade. So the bit of perspex that I bought, the 25 centimeters of perspex, I've cut in half, so this is now 12.5 centimeters. I've got two of them, as I'm actually making two lightsabers at the moment because I have two Darth Vaders. If we look at the image I was sent, you can see that it is 5 inches or 12.5 centimeters long. It does have a slight taper to it, which we're not going to be able to do, but the end we can round off like it is on this one here. So I'm just going to use some small files to gently round the end of it, and then I will smooth that off with some wet and dry paper to make it look a little bit less rough. So let's get this shaped up. So all I'm going to do, take the bit of perspex, this is the end that I've cut, so I think I'm going to use that one as the one to shape, and I'm going to gently start shaping it just by rounding it off as I go. This may take a little while to do. You can see it's starting to look a bit round already. After a few minutes of filing, you can see I've ended up with a fairly good little rounded end there, and I'm just going to use this very fine sandpaper, wet and dry paper, just to, if I hold the end together, I can then just sort of twist this in and carefully sort of sand it down a little bit more to make it a bit more of a smoother round shape, like so. And if I just take the dust off, you can see that that's now quite a nice little rounded end. So I've done both of those, and these are ready and waiting for when the handles are dry. It's now a day later and the milliput has had time to set. As you can see, it's gone nice and firm, so I can just do a little bit of fine tuning. Again, I'm going to use the small needle files just to carefully file down some of these edges, because they should be a little bit more rounded than they are. And then just do a final little bit of shaping before I take this out to the garage and give it a coat of spray paint. I'm going to spray it with some undercoat first and then give it a top coat of a gloss black, and that should make it look quite nice and like the original Darth Vader lightsaber. in the end I did 3 coats of paint. I did an undercoat primer, then I did a coat of a gloss spray paint, and then I did a clear lacquer over the top of it, and this is what they've ended up looking like. I'm pretty pleased really. They look quite nice. The sort of finish is fairly plasticky looking, which is what I was going for. That's the reason I put the lacquer on the top of it, just to give it that sort of shiny finish. So now all that's left to do is to glue in the lightsaber blade. So these should fit quite nicely, as they do. I'm just going to drop a little bit of super glue on the end of these to glue them in place. I'm not quite sure if the originals were glued in, but I assume they must have been, because you wouldn't want the blades of these to fall out. So just a little bit of super glue around the end of the perspex rod, like so. And then I can gently push that in place, and we'll let that glue, and then we can try it out and see how well it looks in Darth Vader's hands. So we'll do the same with the other one.
Impressive.
And here are the finished lightsabers. As you can see, they do look really quite nice when they're in the proper hand of Darth Vader. They are as close as I can get to the originals, judging by the photos that I was sent, and really from a distance, and actually from close up, most people probably wouldn't realise that these were handmade lightsabers. They do look very nice. Now, if you can't find a bit of plastic tubing, I would suggest maybe finding a pen or some other plastic tube that you can use to create the handle for the lightsaber from. Pens and other sort of biros would be an ideal source for that sort of bit of plastic, or go down your model shop and see if you can find the right diameter plastic. They're bound to have something similar. So I hope you found this restoration of Darth Vader's lightsaber interesting, and if you'd like to help me out here at toy-polloi, then please check out my Patreon page, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos.